that were meant to improve instructional hours, specifically at the high school, and also in doing so, increase student achievement there. They're not here. There are some things that are here that I wonder why they're here before that. And I can look at some other things, but for now, those are the two critical things that I would ask for alternatives to see.
Thank you. It obviously sounds like we're in agreement with those two. Mrs. Iacono, do you want to weigh in on that? Okay. Dr. Teitel, do you want to make some comments?
Yeah, I'll make a few comments here. One is we're sort of looking over here to sort out the whole staff development question you asked, because that was not something we prepared for. I think one of them lines up with the whole, the entire program improvement budget that includes staff development in all of the departments. Also, there is a cut in professional development in here, in my list. So I'm reluctant to take too much more out of that, but I'll have to get some more detail on the professional development lines before I can respond to that.
And I mean, if you don't have it.
But there, yeah, as you know, in the budget, there's program implementation budgets for each content area to improve those areas, and so each of those has a staff development component specific to it. And so when you have this many employees, divide that many employees into those numbers, it's really not that much money. But I understand because it's just there's a lump sum in that budget. The breakdown of that in the PD and the object budget, is that?
That's the breakdown.
Yeah. That's over. You were looking at the budget by department there, Mrs. Dow. Yeah, it is in here somewhere, though. Right, yeah, it's in here. Gary, you want to help out with this a little? I just want to be clear on this. Yeah, on page 68, on the instructional services,
So I don't do something wrong. Right?
page 68, the 399,617 number that you had looked at is broken down by department. So that's where that comes
Yeah,
from.
I
Only,
guess what I'm asking, though, then is,
Right.
if you can take a look at those and see
Right.
if there's any areas where we could save a little.
right, and I did, I think Dr. Rosado, I asked him to take a hit in there in the budget cut. There's really only one sort of generic staff development line, and that's the 55,000 there on the second one down. The rest of them are all assigned out to departments for specific initiatives we have. So that was the only line that we really could make a move on. But that's that one. The other part we'll have to look at. Gary, you want to say anything about that?
So what I'm hearing then is no, you can't
Right.
take any further.
Right.
You took
Right.
it in your 50 and you're
Right.
done.
We're taking 50 out of those lines.
Right, so that answers that question.
That's
So
as far
the
as I
answer
want to
is
go with
no.
that one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, do you have anything to say about the 285? Yeah, Margaret Mary. I'm sorry we're not as on top of this.
No,
This was
that's
sort of a
fine.
new one
These are
right
things
here.
that I'm-
Right,
No, that's great. So unfortunately, it's no there.
right.
Mrs. Dow, you mentioned on page 128, there was that line 66,321. It was professional development, and it was 285,000.
Yes.
Okay, I can tell you there are two,
Can you just get, is that 66,321?
21.
yes.
Okay.
That number is made up of two components. The first component is the professional growth tuition reimbursement that teachers receive as part of the collective bargaining agreement when teachers are enrolled in graduate programs that are approved by the district for their master's or sixth-year degree, or programs that would add an additional endorsement to their certificate. That $280,000 is designated for tuition reimbursement. And then the $5,000 is for secretarial professional development. That is also part of their collective bargaining agreement.
Just as a follow-up to that then, and what I notice is that you expend that entire fund every year.
That's correct.
Okay, so that wouldn't be an area that we could go to.
That would not be one I would recommend.
Okay, so now we're at 2 no's. What else do
Right.
we have?
Well, then the elementary staffing model came up before you came. To me, that's a critical piece of moving the district forward. I've heard all the rationale for it. In fact, interestingly, when we had public comment on this budget at the board level, I think virtually all the public comment was from parents in favor of the new elementary staffing model. It's a new way of doing things. It is additional support in all the schools, in language arts, in math, and science. And to me, that is, something I dearly want to hold on to. I'm not, you can pit it against whatever you want. It's not like, well, we put that in, so world language had to go. But that, to me, is not something that we should touch. It's really setting us up for improving student achievement, down the road. It's also a multi-year plan. It was outlined in there, and it's year one of it. The elementary principals are very excited about it. Director of Elementary Education, parents. We're woefully understaffed in the amount of services we provide to kids in math, as an example. 0.4 of resources to every elementary school in math is just not a good use of our resources. So I wouldn't want to touch that one at all. Well, you've heard me talk about maintenance projects. Some of these things have been waiting for a long time. I think it's very short-sighted to cut them. That's what the board has traditionally done, right? You don't want to have to make some of these other cuts, and so the stuff gets deferred and deferred and deferred. Now, Tom's not here to go through every one of them, but if we don't do some painting every year in these buildings, they start to look really bad, and they start to get worse, and it just pushes it off and pushes it off, and we really should be doing $150,000 to $200,000 worth of painting every year in a system our size, and we're doing $50,000 worth. Some of these projects have been on the list for years. So if there's specific projects that you would like more information about, I'll have Tom, put together some info about them, and get them out, so we can go through that again. But I think one of my thoughts on this budget was, again, not to take it out of maintenance's hide, because that thing has been cut and cut and cut, and stuff isn't getting done, and the next thing you know, it's a capital project, and then we're before a town board asking for a project, and they say, well, how come you didn't maintain it? And because we cut the budget, and there's been millions of dollars in maintenance cuts over the past few years. So obviously, a lot of these things were considered and not put on the list because we thought what was on here is, something that was lower of a priority. But, people can differ about that. The transportation on the grandfathering, first of all, I think, can you imagine all the parents driving their kids to these schools if we didn't have the transportation for them? It would be complete chaos. I think that would be very problematic. So grandfathering was the right thing to do. The board definitely voted, for that. But to turn around and say, at this point, we are completely scheduled, we are completely transitioned, we've done everything to move the kids up who need to be moved up to the places. Families have made decisions about taking advantage of it or not. We certainly can't unwind that part of it with a month to go. Pulling the transportation would mean we'd have to say to everybody, well, you have to drive your kid. We already have huge transportation pickup and drop-off issues at some of our very tight sites. I just think that would be, chaos. But that is $342,000 that's sitting in the transportation budget. I think pay to participate is a way to keep all of our great offerings and to keep kids participating in sports. Unfortunately, my alternative to that would be to recommend a reduction in some of these sports in order to get to this number. I don't want to do that. I'd rather charge a fee that's, by area standards, a relatively low fee to help offset some of the costs of this. rather than eliminate any sports or eliminate freshman sports that are happening in some places. I mean, if kids can't afford it, then we'll have a mechanism to make sure they can still participate. And I know this is a difficult one for people to swallow. My only response, I mean, freshman sports cost about $150,000. So that's 150 of your 250. And then you'd have to eliminate some other sports to get to the number. That's in the non-personnel side of it. Remember, I was trying to keep this at about 80% personnel and 20% non. That's in the non-personnel side of it. I think we're doing enough damage on the personnel side to have to go to other things there. I think that the world language decision is just a matter of, there's just a lot of bad choices to make here. We're not eliminating the program. To get to that number, I think the only thing that you have to do, because I don't think you want to reduce the support that we have in the elementary staffing models, I think you'd have to look at elementary class size. I think that's where you'd get your money from. I don't think that's a good choice. I've tried to keep elementary class size, but something has to go. We can't do everything. We still have the world language program. I'm sure the teachers will tell us it's a bad idea, and I agree with them. I would expect them to tell us that. But to me, you put up almost anything at the elementary level at this point, class size, staffing model, whatever, I think those are more important to keep at this point. And I'm not trying to denigrate world language at the elementary level. I don't want people to take this the wrong way. But we got to come up with $2.8 million somewhere. And that's the issue I have with it. And central office medical benefits, I don't know a thing about. So there's probably 8 people that affects. So don't know much about it. We just researched it today. I don't see where that's going to get us anywhere, but could be wrong. So that's my brief reaction to it. Obviously, if I thought there were other better ideas out there, I would have put them on there, but ultimately, as I said before, these are my recommendations, and it's the 9 board members that are going to have to make the call. And I just, that's where I think we are with it. So I don't think you want to touch the elementary staffing model. I think there's too much good that's going to come from that to push back on it now.
Anything else before?
No, that's enough.
Okay, I see your hand. I wanted to make sure Dr. Title's is finished.
Yeah.
Mrs. Iacono.
Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to thank Mrs. Dow for going through and looking and seeing where there might be some savings, and unfortunately, there's nothing there, as we just learned. And I want to thank Mrs. Albin for, her concerns about world language. I share the same concerns. But if the alternative to world language is increasing the class size, then I would rather cut back on the world language program. So I'm prepared to support that the way you've written it. I don't like it, but it is the way it has to be unless we want larger classes. Pay to play, I don't like this either. I've said this for the past 2 years, but if the alternative is to eliminate sports, then I'd rather have to pay the user fee. It is a tax. It's everything Mrs. Albin said it is. But if it comes down to eliminating a sport versus having to pay to be able to participate in it, I'd rather leave that. And maybe what the board can consider is some caveat that we have to revisit this again in a year so it doesn't go on year after year after year, and pay to play stays in place. I'd rather see that be a one-year thing, and then we evaluate where our budget is next year, and sort of take it from there. So I'll throw that out there for the committee's consideration. And based on that, this board has gone before every funding body in the entire town. And we have stood and we have told them what the consequences of not getting our full recommendation would be. And I would like to commend again Dr. Title and his staff for doing exactly what he said he would do. He said 80% would come out of personnel, 20% would be non-personnel. He said we had nowhere else to go on maintenance, nowhere else to go on technology, and true to his word, that is what is here. This board has a serious credibility issue. It would be irresponsible of us not to seriously weigh this recommendation because it's so honest and it's so forthright. And quite frankly, it stinks, but we all knew it was coming. And personally, I think the $800,000 that the RTM took was too deep. The $2 million hurt, but the $800 really went too far, in my opinion. But this is where we said we would go, and this is what is going to happen, and now we need to live with it, as rough as it is. And I'm not willing to go into this budget book and start hitting maintenance, because that is what we always do. And then we stand, and it ends up being me and usually one other board member going to all these meetings, or whoever's available, and we beg, borrow, and steal to make things happen. And they say no. And then we get criticized because we don't take care of our buildings. And we can point fingers and say, well, we don't take care of it because they didn't give us the money, or this, that, and the other thing. But we're ultimately the ones making the decision. And I think it's finally time that we just need to invest in the maintenance, as the superintendent has told us. My children go to a school where the paint is peeling off the walls. It's disgusting. It is disgusting. Sure, we can push off paint projects for another year. We can push off a lot of projects for another year, and they're going to cost more to repair. And then we're going to be in a situation just where they are capital projects, and they're not going to get funded. They're not even funding boilers at this point. So I think this is where we are. I won't support any more cuts to maintenance. I won't support any cuts to technology. I will not support not moving forward with the initiative at the elementary school level that will improve instruction there that has been needed for a very long time. We've had now a fresh pair of eyes looking at paying attention to some things over there. I think we have some opportunities in this to capitalize on and make better per the audit. It's not fun to lay people off. It's awful. It's a horrible feeling. I used to do it for a living. It's awful to call someone in your office and to say to them, you no longer have a job, and here are 3 pieces of paper to tell you how you get unemployment. It's sickening. But it's where we are, and it's not fun. But we have to do it. The 2.8 has to come from somewhere. And unfortunately, we don't have the infrastructure to take it from there anymore. So this is where we are. I'm prepared to fully support this. I've waited. I said at the last meeting, I've been through it. Traditionally, this subcommittee gets on the same page and then goes forward with a recommendation to the full board. And I'm hopeful that we can do that right now tonight so that we can move forward and not have complete and utter chaos at the board table for 2 nights of budget meetings. So that's all I have to say on the matter.
Okay, thank you for your viewpoints and your thoughts, Mrs. Iacono. I still feel the same way. I want to see world language and pay to play back. Let Mrs. Albin speak for herself, but I believe she would feel the same way. I obviously respect and thank Dr. Teitel for all his recommendations, but those 2 are hard for me to stomach, and I think the benefits there for the students, we have to take and look at that then harder. And I have a feeling, I mean, I do want to let the public speak by 6 o'clock, well, we can have a few more minutes to discuss, but I think what's going to happen is that it looks like our recommendation is going to go forward, I would think, to the full board, in that this needs to be looked at by the full board, because it looks like we're going to fall out on support pay-to-play in world language. You want to stay just with everything as is, and so I think this evening at 7:30, we'll be discussing with the entire board what their viewpoints on world language and pay-to-play are, and what their viewpoints then are on some of these other options, because obviously we can only have them if we deduct something else. And I know the maintenance, it's tough. I know, lived through McKinley, and that's why I don't want anything with water intrusion. But I'd rather have a wall peeling than a child not have the opportunity to have a world language when we know they really should have it at, 4 or 5. The younger you have it, the better. It's before all those synapses close as we get older. And I just think there's too many vital outcomes from the sports. And I know, just one thing to throw out too, though, when I know Dr. Title said he said this the other day, that if you were on free or reduced lunch, there'd be waivers, and then he repeated that today. But then I wonder, we don't know how many students that comprises, and so maybe we're not really going to find a $250,000 savings, especially now with the economy the way it is. Maybe there's a lot more who would qualify, and then we're taking something out and dismantling a program that maybe we won't have that full savings in.
Can I talk
So
about that?
that's- Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we did some pretty good research on this to arrive at that, because the last thing I want to do is put something in as a cut that's a phantom, right? I want to make sure it's real. So we actually ran numbers with the existing current year numbers at the 125, 175, and 225 level. So the only sports that wouldn't be 125 would be gymnastics, bowling, swimming, and sailing. Those are sports with moderate rental costs. Those would be 175. The sports with the high rental costs, which are skiing and ice hockey, would be 225. And the family cap of 500 a year. So we ran that with all of the current enrollment, for lack of a better word, on it. Then we subtracted off a deduct for the percentage of students that are currently in each high school on free and reduced lunch. And we took a deduct for our estimate of what the family cap, what the impact of that hit would be. And we're still, even with those numbers, we're above 250. Then there's also a provision that families experiencing a hardship who cannot afford the fee can request that the fee be waived or reduced, so we took a deduct for that as well. In other words, you might have a hardship that hits your family, but you still don't qualify for free or reduced lunch. And so there's a provision in there for that. So even with all those deducts, we're still comfortable at the 250.
Okay.
So we actually did run all those figures in some detail.
Okay, and it's the latter one.
So-
I'm glad to see you ran
Yeah.
it on the free and reduced. The latter I'm concerned about, like I said, because I think some parents, unfortunately, if faced with their child maybe being someone who sits on the bench a lot and paying 120, was it 125 or 175?
125 would be the
I mean, like they
typical,
wouldn't,
right.
yeah, that, they might decide for the child,
Right.
So
But I also
I'm glad
don't.
you did build in something to.
Right, we
for
did.
that.
We did for that. So we have some cushion built into that. I mean, that there could be fewer students participating, but obviously not as many if you don't have the sports at all. So this is not a dismantling of the sports program. In fact, this is a way to enable our incredible sports program to move forward. I'm not sure we ever calculated the full cost of sports here, but this $250,000 represents a small fraction. The taxpayers are still funding this at, I don't know what it would be, 95% of the costs of the athletic programs. And so I just wanted to point out that was factored into the decision of how we arrived at that figure. We also looked at what other districts have charged, and these are pretty modest. Lots of them, there's a whole variety of districts that have it. I guess there was a big article in the Danbury paper about it recently. This is becoming more and more commonplace, unfortunately. And just a generic comment here is, if every single year we're just going to move forward what we're doing now, and we're only going to add something different, if everything that we're currently doing gets funded, we'll be sitting around for the next 5 years doing exactly what we're doing now. So if we're ever going to make changes to improve things, if we're ever going to look at things like a new way of staffing elementary, or eventually, I think, perhaps a new high school schedule, we're going to have to put those into place, knowing that something we're doing now has to either be reduced or eliminated if it doesn't add as much value. It's a cost-benefit analysis. So one of the things people asked me to do was not just simply move everything forward. Look at how we're doing things and maybe do things differently. And of course, whatever you pick to be reduced is, you know, unfortunate, but basically, I think that with the economy sort of stuck in this mode for the foreseeable future, or at least people's attitudes towards paying more, if the baseline is, before you can do anything else, you have to do everything you're doing now, I think we're just never going to be able to make any progress. That's just sort of a generic statement for any kind of initiative as we move ahead. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's philosophical, not specific.
Mrs. Albin had kind of whispered in my ear, she had something to comment. Oh, all right, good.
Thank you. That is exactly why you were hired, Dr. Title, because we couldn't continue to build and go. You don't get something for nothing. That is the message that is out there in town, and it really, really stinks to be sitting on the Board of Ed right now, trust me, to be sitting here and not being able to move forward with initiatives that I would love to see going forward. I've sat on this board for 3 years saying I want to stop talking about facilities and start talking about world language starting in kindergarten. But you can't get there, unfortunately, in this type of economy. And you can't get there building in the middle and going from there. You don't get something for nothing. And it's just the reality of where we are. And this is hard for everybody. And everyone's going to jockey for what they think is the most important thing. You know, and in this, everybody loses a little, unfortunately. But I thank you, because I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Okay, Mrs. Albin, you, didn't raise your hand, but she did say she had something earlier.
Dr. Title, you said that, to my earlier question, which is to the two items for world language, you gave me the answer for that. So it's world language versus class size. And it's pay to play can be avoided by, your recommendation would be the elimination of certain programs, i.e. the first was freshman sports at 150. Where would we find the other 100?
Then we would have to look at some maybe low enrollment, high cost sports.
I have a figure supplied to me by Mrs. McWayne on the middle, I'm not suggesting, I'm just, of 196,580 for the middle school sports and intramural programs.
Right, the intramural, the sports program at the middle school is largely intramural.
Okay.
Right, so, yeah, you'd have to do some cutting, you know, pretty significant scaling back of that. I don't want to necessarily identify particular sports at the high school, because I think it's a hypothetical conversation,
Well,
but that would be the,
If for
it would be reductions, and that would, again, that would be my recommendation, that's where I think, you know, you'd have to go with it, but ultimately,
if for the full board discussion, maybe you could have a recommendation totaling 250?
sure.
And then, as I said earlier, if the board chooses to go for pay-to-play, or they choose to do it through your Plan B recommendation, you know, that'll be up to at least 5 votes, and I'll respect those votes. Just a couple quick points. I'd like to draw this to a close. World language was lost in the elementary schools in the 1970s, and it didn't return to the elementary schools until the mid-90s, 23 years later. So we're in very difficult times, and I'm not going to advocate at this point. I'm just going to say that when we do change and give things up, it's going to be a very long time before we see them again. And so that's going to be the reality. We started working on the high school schedule, which was to produce a fixed lunch period, increased instructional time to bring us in line with the other schools around the state in 2003. We've never implemented it. All of those things were also to increase student achievement. We've never implemented that. Who knows when we'll implement that? Hopefully, a board in the near future will be able to do so in one of these future budgets. I don't know what they'll have to drop off the list in order to do that, but I hope to see it as a reader of the newspaper at some point, not as a board member sitting here. But that said, Mrs. Dow, I think we should go to the public and hear from them. I don't think the three of us are going to really find much more or do much more work here. I'm prepared to send this document forward to the full board for their consideration, but not with my recommendation that it be adopted as is, because I suspect that the full board needs to have their say. This is not a usual year. In the last 3 budget years, we have lost $9.3 million in funding in this town. $9,288,000 in change, to be more specific. And it's that loss of funding that is why we're here tonight, and we will be here these next few nights, looking to find the crumb on the floor that we can use to pay for what we need to do for our students. It's why we're looking at taking away instruction in world language, why we're talking about all the things we're talking about here. It's not the 2.8, the 800 may be pushing this year deeper than we want. It's the $9.3 million that's put us here. And we need to make sure that people in town understand that. So I think we have to have this discussion at the full board table, the whole list. It's the year where it hit the fan, and that's just the truth. And that's where we are. So I would recommend that we send this document forward for full board discussion. That would be my recommendation. I'll make a motion if you would like.
Not yet. I'd rather just move along. I mean, I agree with you that I had said earlier we're
Would you like to have public discussion and then, fine.
Yeah. She said she'd be happy to make it if I wanted.
I
so
can
I'm
make it
saying-
later if you want.
Let's just wait.
I mean, if we want to take action.
I think we're
we'll-
going, I said earlier, and that was what you're agreeing to, that yes, it's going to have to go before the whole board. We're not all agreeing here, and we do need all 9 people to kind of vet it out and discuss it. But I do want to go to public comment. I had said I'd try to get there by 6, so we're pretty close to that. I just wanted to make 2 comments. First, though, one, I obviously couldn't, I mean, I thank you for offering something else. I just can't go with putting freshman sports, knocking that out, because again, there's kids who play freshman sports that then don't go on to make the JV team, and that's, again, their only chance. So I can't take that off to save pay for play. To me, it's one and the same. And just one comment, because I had several questions about the benefits, for the medical benefits. I need to get a little more information on it. I was given information, like I said, from Mrs. McQueen right before the meeting started, and this is because they only got the request late. I don't want you to think she's not doing her job. She's doing her job. It's just that the request came late. But for those who were interested, the central office, and when I say I need more information is because I have a percentage. I don't know what that works out to in money. So she can let us know at another time, but central office, certified and non-certified, do pay less than the administrators, like the principals. It was explained to me, though, that the administrators wanted to raise their benefits and take, at some point in time through the past years, and take an increase in pay, where central office said, no, we want to keep our medical benefits lower and have a lower increase in pay. So they're out of whack with each other, but there was a reason for it being as such. But as such, there's some non-certified and central office paying in 7%, certified paying 10%, and administration, the unionized group, meaning building principals, they pay 16%. So they do pay higher. But like I said, I don't have figures to show what their, how their salaries worked into this in past. And co-pays are $5 versus $20, and $25 versus $50 for emergency and urgent care. So that I just wanted to put out there, and then we can go to public comment.
May I speak to that?
Yeah, if you can do so quickly, otherwise we'll do public comment, and you can bring this up after public comment.
I guess then what the question is, can you just tell us what if we were to raise the contributions for central office certified and central office non-certified so that it matched what the administrator's contract would be, what that dollar savings would raise?
I'd have to calculate that.
Okay, can you find out what that is? And then we'll just know what that dollar is? Okay, awesome.
Mirroring the benefits of the administrators?
Correct. Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I would like to go to the public then, and after public, then we can wrap up things, and if we want to make motions or whatever, do that at that point in time. So if you do want to speak, if you could come forward and kind of make a line, because I did see more than 2 hands before, only because we'll allow a little more time if there's only 2 people than if there's 20.
Hi, Ann Pasco representing the FEA. I am struck by a couple of things as I review the recommendations. First of all, I thought that this was going to be shared. I do not see in this document any administrative cuts, not that I'm advocating any, but I do see that it is teachers, paras, the first line, which is district, items 1, 2, and 3. Those are primarily teachers in my bargaining unit. They are not administrators, even though they're listed in the district. Secondly, as much as I would like to move forward and put in new things as an educator, the elementary matrix being one of them, if you really want the public to feel the pain, then you affect the greatest number of people, and that is all the elementary schools. Simply taking the one world language segment is not sharing the pain. As far as the grandfathering, that was a very difficult decision that was made. The public was very divided, and at the time it was done in the vacuum. They did not know what the fiscal implications would be 6 months later. Now we know what they are. There is not enough money. These recommendations were made on the assumption that there would be no grandfathering reduction. So yes, everything is in place, but that's because it was assumed that everything would be in place and that the grandfathering would not be touched. It's sad to see that program goes before buses, that language is removed, but children will be driven to their proper middle school even though they won't be having the courses that they should be having. That's the sad thing. And one other difference, in the 90s we knew why we were cutting budgets. The children simply were not there. The children are there. I don't understand why this is happening.
Hi, Tina Dijonette, 35 Quaker Lane. Everything on there that you have, essentially someone could call it a perk, not a need. But I think all of them are educationally beneficial perks. Word language is certainly educationally beneficial. Having sports is educationally beneficial in many ways, unlike, an English class or a French class. I don't see the educational benefit of the busing for grandfathering. I realized it was a lot of work to go into it and do the redistricting. I have heard from some that you can't cancel the grandfathering even if you cancel the buses because Woods won't be ready. Then maybe we don't redistrict yet. We wait another year to redistrict, and next year you do the redistricting without the busing. And believe me, I know it was long and hard work. It was long and hard work when we did the scheduling for the high schools, but the money wasn't there, and it was scrapped. Sometimes it's just time to do the right thing, and I don't see any educational benefit to the buses. I see educational benefit in almost every other cut that's there. So to me, I just don't understand. I see where everybody could call them all perks and extras, but they're perks and extras that have benefit to it and to all the students. The buses don't go to all the students. World language goes to every elementary student. Busing doesn't. Late buses at the high school, it may seem like a perk, but there's a lot of kids that that's the only way they get extra help. And to teachers, that's huge, that we can give a kid extra help. Now that child won't have a way to get home. Not every parent in this town is a stay-at-home parent. So I hope you think about some of that. Thank you.
Susan Brown, 170 Pemburn Drive. Mrs. Albin was looking for crumbs on the floor, and I think that there may be some crumbs to be found in the insurance benefits at the central office. And so I just would like the assurance of this board that the compensation and benefits of all non-union Board of Education employees will be reviewed for the following. What are the co-pays, medical and dental, for all non-union staff in the district? $5? What percentage of health and dental premiums do non-union employees pay for themselves? Is it comparable to what the bargaining units are paying? What percentage of health and dental family coverage premiums do non-union employees pay? Again, is it comparable to what the bargaining units are paying? By what percentage has the salary of each and every non-union employee increased in the last 3 years? Again, is it comparable to the salary increases that the bargaining units have been given? And finally, has every non-union employee taken a zero for at least 1 year in the last 3 years? The second item I'd like to address is the cuts to the IT department. As an elementary media tech in this district, I know firsthand how the use of technology in our elementary schools will suffer by the reduction that's been proposed. I'm a parent and I'm a taxpayer in Fairfield, and I do not see how this board can approve a 50% reduction in help desk staff at the elementary school without knowing there's a plan in place to support the technology at the elementary level. It's not like we're cutting a program and it won't be there. The children are there. The computers, the laptops, the notebooks, the netbooks, the Palms, the printers, the smartboards, the iPods, the iPads, the iTouches, the daunting array of software, both web-based and otherwise, are there. We own them, and they are an integral part of our technology, of our curriculum. Without good tech support, they will go offline. And when they go offline, teachers will not use them anymore, and students will not use them anymore. The third thing that I'd like to ask you is that this weekend, as I collected petitions for this referendum, many people asked me, how do we know that if the referendum is successful, that the money will go to restore the world language program and pay to play? And I said, well, that's Dr. Title's recommendation. But as we all know, it's a board vote that puts that money back. And so I think it's very important that as a board, if we find ourselves in the fortunate situation of having that money restored, that you commit publicly to pay to play in world language. And on the subject of pay to play, I hate to even address it because I am so adamantly opposed to it. One of the things that we do exceptionally well in both of our high schools is extracurriculars. It's an important part of educating whole children. That is our job. I can tell you, it is not the star athletes who will suffer from pay to play. It's the student who might take a risk to go out for a freshman team because it's no cuts and there is no financial barrier. They'll make a commitment, they'll become part of a team, maybe for the first time in their lives, and they will follow through for an entire season. They may decide not to play that sport the following year, but they will have put themselves out there and become part of something beyond themselves. They'll have grown and learned a lesson that will help them continue to take the kind of healthy risks required to become part of their community and to be successful in high school and beyond. I would think that as a board who recently enacted a breathalyzer policy, you are well aware of the alternative types of risk-taking behavior that would become a more viable option for many of our students if you create a pay-to-play barrier to athletics. And having said how much I think is wrong to do in the first place, I have to strongly caution you that if you do decide to tax kids for bits and pieces of their education, do not discriminate against athletes. The burden should be shared by all students who participate in any form of extracurricular activity. I think in Shelton, they call it, Shelton and Oxford, they call it pay to participate. And if that is the model that Fairfield aspires to, it's a sad, sad day.
Betty Ann OShaughnessy, Queens Grant Road. A few things. I've also been talking with a lot of people to try to get signatures, and people who have been strong advocates of education are really hesitant about trying to get money back because they feel they don't know if the money will be well spent. And the reason is option E, that it was said when the board voted for option E that they did not do a financial analysis about the cost, and they did not look at grandfathering as part of that cost, and that's a big number. And people see that busing or programs, and they want programs, not busing. So that's been unfortunate. Another thing I did ask, or I do want to know about, is the Dr. Title said that the pay for sports is low, what they're proposing is low for area standards. I was wondering if anybody knows how many FCAC teams have pay to play for sports. I don't know myself. Another thing, someone said everyone loses a little in this. The high school loses quite a bit more than a little. If I add up everything, and some things I have to just ballpark because it's lumped together with other things, I look at it as $1.8 million is on the high schools. We have about a third of the students at the high school level, maybe a little less, and that 1.8 includes the $500,000 saved in busing to change the start time. And nobody argued about that because they said, 500,000, that's a lot of money, so be it. We have to go back to 7:30. Although I do worry about the kids who are getting on the bus at 6:20 or 6:30 in the morning, because we also know that high school students don't wake up in the morning. Another thing was, someone said, is do not let this go past tonight as it will cause chaos at the board table. Excuse me? That's all I have to say about that one. Excuse me? I think the taxpayers and the residents of this town have a right to speak, and you should welcome that. One other thing is the counselors at the high school, it it was either last year or the year before, tried to eliminate time at the beginning of the school year. We need them at the beginning of the school year. They revise schedules. We do not have a good student management system. A lot of things are done manually, and we have low instructional hours now. We need them to get students in classes as soon as possible at the beginning of the school year. And what my last question is on the teacher reserve of 3 at the elementary school level. I did quite a bit of work this weekend looking through the current enrollments and the projections. I noticed there are a couple classes this year, Jennings and Osborne Hill kindergartens, who did not go by the guidelines. They have 1 extra section. I don't know the reason for that. There may be a very good, valid reason for that. But I was just wondering if we're going to do any type of that special class size in any schools other than McKinley next year, and whether, when I looked at the projections, there were a couple classes that are on the cusp, but do we actually know that students have registered? Thank you.
Hi, Laura Amicucci on Sturgis Road. I won't talk to the numbers because that's Betty Ann's thing. I don't do that very well. I just wanted to get up here and say we have a wonderful school system, and I'm preaching to the choir by telling all of you, and I'm preaching to this choir here by saying it, but it would be remiss of me to not get up here and talk about that. I don't know what the answers are, and there's nothing worse than a mom who comes up and says, there has to be change, but I don't have the answer, because I know that none of the answers are obvious, or we would have them already. You're a pretty smart group. I think the answers probably come with a lot of creativity. And your point, Ms. Albin, that this is not only the worst year we've experienced, but a year that is bad because of the accumulation of bad years. And it's really hitting now. But I read, Dr. Title, you suggested something that I thought was really pretty creative about charging students to park in the parking lot. And I'm not saying that's an answer. I'm saying that's the kind of creativity that we need to bring to the table. I know that one of the negative issues that went hand in hand with that was the idea that there'd be parking on the side streets. But I think we can combat that with putting up signs saying no parking here between the hours of, 8 and 3. If we can afford to give our kids a car, or if there's a reason we give our kids a car to go to school and they can pay $50 a week for gas, they can pay $100 or $125 a year to park. I mean, that's one of many creative solutions that cumulatively probably could find that $800,000. That alone could probably come up with 100. But my concern is we talk about things like world language and we use the word perk. And I'm going to get emotional now because I love my teachers so much here. And I don't think a world language, the word world tells us it's not a perk. The world is getting smaller, and we will do such a disservice to our children when we not only, all sports aside, that shouldn't be removed, but when we start referring to a world language or a world requirement as an extra or a perk, we've missed the boat. I don't even think, you know me, so you know I'm going to talk about music. I don't even think that music is a perk. We had a wonderful awards ceremony last week, and the kids that got up and received these awards all had a strength in music and all had a strength in the world language. And it's not a fluke. It's not a coincidence that these kids who pour themselves into their academics have the link to all those other those other academic strengths. And every student should have the right to those. That said, even the pay to play, when we start breaking up our program in school, it stops being a public program when we ask to pay for all these different opportunities. And sitting on a board of 3 different schools, I can tell you, when the money runs out and the headmasters and the principals don't know where to find the money, they're going to come to us at the board. And we're going to do what we do best. We're going to have a bake sale to find the money so that all these kids who want to play and all these parents who can't afford it will be connected, and we will make sure that they are able to play. But it will come back to the parents at the end. So if we don't find it at the front end, we're going to find it at the back end. And we've never let our students down, but we've seen programs disappear because the money simply isn't there. But the PTAs in this town come up with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to make sure that situations like that get funded. So we will do whatever we can, but we can't support a loss of $2.8 million. That's a lot of cupcakes. So what we need to do is put our money where our mouth is and treat world language, treat sports, treat the whole child. Because some of these kids will excel in music, some will excel in language, some will excel in sports. There's a reason we have the program, and I think we need to hold on to the program. If it has to go, it shouldn't go before we look at things like paying to park before we're paying to play. We do have a bus system. We can't fight that $400,000 on the one hand and on the other hand say to the kids that you get to park for free. If they can't afford to park, then they can take the bus that we're paying that extra money for. The point is we need to be creative. We need to find various solutions before we say it's simply a matter of taking language and sports and teachers away from our kids. Too many kids opt not to go to private schools because of the caliber of our education. Too many kids leave private schools and come back to the public school because it's such a great school system. We need to honor that. Thank you.
Richard Jocelyn, Carriage Drive, Southport. I'll be very fast. I know you guys are looking at the clock. But about 7 points, if you don't mind. Every year I've been up here reviewing the budget with as a Board of Ed rep and whatnot, and every year the Board of Ed subcommittee goes through each item through numbers and goes through a kind of a vote, which ones they like, which ones they don't like, and each item that is proposed by the superintendent is kind of checked off on, and it's never been a one size, take it or leave it type of an approach. This is the first year I've seen there's no other alternative choices. So I think I encourage go back to the old way, which was to have a lot of choices to the board, have the board discuss, have the board digest. It won't be chaos. You guys are competent. You guys are smart. Don't sell your board members short. The second part of it is that the RTM painfully went through line by line each item of every department head budget. To not do so by your own before people are laid off, I mean, someone mentioned about the credibility of the Board of Ed. If you don't do it, then what kind of credibility do you have that you're not replicating or emulating smart people who went through the budget and found savings, and everyone praised the notion of savings. So I went through in a few minutes here to come up with some items. Maybe you might want to think about some of them. Legal fees went up by $135,000. Maybe we do $35,000 less, try and make do with a little bit less, and maybe we save a teacher. Recruiting expense, unchanged. Interesting. I don't think we'll be hiring many people next year. Maybe we will, but maybe we kind of cut that as well. I see extracurricular salary increase next year. I think in proposals there are going to be reductions in extracurricular activities at the high school, so why are we increasing the salaries? Or the stipend, I should say. In the past, there have been some board suggestions or recommendations that were not passed. I throw them out there for you just for consideration or thinking if they're still valid. Apparently there are some individual music lessons that take place. Some people have questioned that. Preschool funding via open choice funds. That could save a couple $100,000. I'm not sure if that's changed. Eliminate the Regional Center for Arts funding for 25 children. That would save $67,000. I think it's a trip somewhere that is paid for. Change the town building facility use of facility charges. I think it was changed last year. Maybe change it again. Get a little more money from the people that use it. I do have a petition in the room to restore $800,000. I hope anyone who would like to stop by and sign it. I would encourage the 2 board members in the room that they should also sign it. 2, well actually 1, because this is obviously going to save jobs. So at the end of the day, I think the downside of signing is in my mind 0. Upside is someone saves their job. Maybe the people who lose their job will come here and ask you to sign as well. The last thing I'd say to you is the shared sacrifice. I mean, it rings hollow that there's no cut central office. not even a symbolic gesture. If you look at the Board of Ed budget, your own department, you're increasing by $3,000. Cut to no increase. How hard will that be? It's a small item, but it's symbolic. If it's really shared, then maybe you have a coming up for this year, maybe people just simply say, I'll give up 1.89% of my salary or bonus because that's the cut from the RTM and the Board of Finance. Thanks.
Hi, Beth Eckert, World Language Coordinator for grades 4-8. I will also try to keep this short. First, I'd like to thank all of you for all of your time and commitment to the Fairfield Public Schools. I really don't envy you right now. You've been given an impossible task, and all of the programs that are slated for cuts truly are valuable. Many of my colleagues and I are here tonight, and we are here really to go on the record and to show support for our program and to those whose positions are in jeopardy. We truly believe in what we do. We believe that knowing other languages and understanding other cultures is a 21st century skill for our students as they prepare to live and work in a global society. Our elementary program is the first building block in the foundation of a well-articulated sequence of language learning. Beginning world language instruction early sets the stage for students to develop advanced levels of proficiency. I'm just going to end my very short talk by the ending of a letter written by a first-year teacher in our school district. She says that she hopes Fairfield can continue to be a model school district that recognizes and supports language learning from an early age. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all those who came up and spoke. I guess where we stand now is basically that we can adjourn and just move this forward to the meeting this evening.
I would.
Okay, Mrs. Iacono.
Just a couple of things before we move on to the points that came up in public comment. That's sort of what I was trying to say. I wasn't saying that I wanted to go through this list and say yes or no recommendation in an effort to cut down on the chaos at the table. If you have 9 people all over the place, it's been helpful the way we've done it in the past, as opposed to just passing through the whole list without really delving into it, I guess is my point. I didn't mean to say that the board wasn't capable of going through it. It's just that in the past, we've had line-by-line discussion, yay, nay, what we're going to move forward. We didn't do that this year. The 2 other members don't want to do that. That's fine. I will go on the record. I went on the record last time. If the money's put back in the budget, I will support world language and pay to play. I will support putting world language back in and getting rid of pay to play. I said that at the last meeting, and I'll state it again for the record. And just to a couple of points, we tried to go after the parking. Unfortunately, it's not going to work. There's a cost to implementing it too. So how high do you charge for parking to cover your costs for doing it and making the money? Trust me, this has been high on my list of trying to go there. It just doesn't really work right now. In terms of the legal fees, we have union negotiations coming up, so that's unfortunately not going to work. All of our open choice money is accounted for. I actually am inclined to look at the facility charges, so thank you for that suggestion. But my point, and I'm only speaking for myself, is I've said this over and over again. I've been through this book backwards, forwards, upside down. If I could find something, I would put it on. Trust me, I don't want to vote for anything on this piece of paper. Not one thing. It's just that the alternative is worse. And if my alternative for world language is class size, then painfully I have to go with world language. And if my alternative to pay to play is eliminate sports, then painfully I go to pay to play. But I did just want to put that out there. You know, we're looking into the benefits issue, so I thank that for being raised as well.
Mrs. Albin?
Yes, I too was interested to hear the discussion on non-unionized staffing and the benefits, and and I'll be interested in that information. But at this point in time, to move this forward so we can adjourn before our next meeting, I would make a motion that this committee will move the superintendent's recommendations forward for full board discussion, but without endorsement by this committee tonight. So my motion is that this committee will, without its endorsement, move the superintendent's proposed budget adjustments for fiscal year 2011-2012 forward to the full board at its meeting May 16th, 2011, for a full discussion. Is there a second?
Okay, it doesn't look like there's a second right now. I want the entire thing to be moved up and spoken to.
That's what my
I think-
motion suggests.
Yeah, I know. But I also am wondering if I, rather than seconding that, the reason I'm not seconding is that I think I either wanted something in there about some of us not agreeing to the cuts in road language or pay to play, or else just without a motion then agree that this needs to go forward, and that's what we're going to discuss tonight.
That's what this motion suggests,
But I
that
would-
this entire document will go forward as is without our endorsement, but for, without the endorsement, Mrs. Dow, means that I'm not prepared to
understand
support
what
some
that
of the line
means.
items.
I understand what that means. I was just not
But for
gonna
the board
turn it
to
into
have a
motion.
full discussion on all 40 line items.
Okay, then,
So I think that should satisfy your desires.
I don't even know. I'm not even
Um,
sure since I've not been in the...
The chair doesn't make a motion.
I don't know. Are you?
Never
not
ran
seconding
across
it,
that
okay.
situation in
So-
in nearly 12 years.
And I'm not sure, so, well, we can just...
So it's
yeah,
on the
just
agenda,
hold it.
we'll just go forward.
discuss it.
I'll make a motion to
Take no
adjourn.
action and adjourn. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
It's on the, it's going to be discussed.
It's on the agenda. I mean, normally we take some sort of action.